You're ready to come up to me, right? No, it's downstairs. It's downstairs. Let's go to the Lord in prayer to prepare our hearts and our minds to hear God's word. Now, I am going to admit something today. All of you are going to be shocked at what I'm going to admit. My wife is going to be completely thrown for a loop. I admit this. Here goes. I am a control freak. I like to be in control of everything. And the best example happens in our basement while we watch TV. Of course, I'm talking about that remote control.
Amen.
I don't know what it means about me, Mike, or you when you amen remote control, but that's what happens. So, it feels good in your hand, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's nice and smooth, and the contours, it fits perfectly into your hand. It's perfectly balanced, but most of all, I like having that power. That power, that control. If you want the volume up, you have to go through me. Right?
Yeah.
If you get bored during a commercial, or if I get bored during a commercial, I have the power to change the channel during that commercial. In fact, I have such a problem with this controlling issue with the remote control. One time Megan wanted to watch something when I wasn't home and she didn't know how to work the remote and she had to call me and I had to walk her through the steps because she has never had the pleasure of holding the remote in her hand. Now I'm guessing that I'm not the only one, obviously. Like Michelle is right there with me. But I guess I'm the only one that feels this way. And I have control in other issues. I have control issues in other areas as well. And that's probably why I'm an elementary teacher. Okay? Because I like control. And I control those fourth graders. I control them. And I tell them to do something, and they do. I can't even say that. Yeah, I can't even say that with a straight face. But, you know, I try and whatnot. But I do like to be in control. And I am in control of the classroom, I control the students, I'm in control of what they learn, how they learn, and all that stuff. I love the power, and I like the control. And even though that whole part might not be exactly accurate, it's how I want it to be. And I think I actually struggle as a parent because I can't control my children. And Megan often says to me, you want to control them like you control your classroom. And I look at her and I say, yes. That's exactly what I want to do. But the whole point of this is that I understand the desire to be in control. And that goes hand in hand with power. And I really don't think of myself as power hungry or wanting power, because for some reason that makes me sound like a horrible person. But I do like to be in control. And I'm not interested in power. I just want to be in control of everything. I don't see a contradiction in that at all. But I can't deny that power and control are related. They are related. And unfortunately, with that, when there is power and control, conflict isn't very far behind. And the quest for power and control often results in conflict. And I read a story when I was researching the passage this week. And it was a story about a wise elder or a sage in a village. And he he had power, and he had control, and he tried to use that control to control conflict. And so this is a story that I read, and I think it sums it all up here. It says, there were two men who lived in a small village, and they got into this terrible dispute, and they could not resolve it. And so they decided to go to the town chieftain or the wise sage in the town. And the first man went to the sage's home, and he told his version of what happened. And when he finished, the sage said, "You are absolutely right." And the next night, the second man came to the sage, and he gave his side of the story. And the sage responded to him, "You are absolutely right." And afterward, the sage's wife scolded her husband. She said, "Those two men came in, told you two completely opposite sides of the story, and you told them both that they were absolutely right. That's impossible. They both can't be absolutely right." And so the sage turned to his wife and he said, "You are absolutely right." Now, it isn't quite that simple. And the Bible verse today hits on that topic. And once Jesus came onto the scene, the religious leaders of the time, they could see their control slipping away. They could see it slipping through their fingers. And once they lost that control, they realized that their power wasn't far behind. And they liked having power. And so they became desperate to maintain control. And this, of course, is what leads to problems. So let's take a look at Luke chapter 13. These are verses 10 through 17. It said, on a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over. She could not straighten up at all. And when Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to the woman, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." And then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Now, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue leader said to the people, "There are 6 days for work. So come and be healed on those days, but not on the Sabbath." And the Lord answered him, "You hypocrites, don't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water. Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan had kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what has bound her?" And when he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things that he was doing. There's a Harvard professor by the name of Hugh O'Doherty, and he says that all conflict is about power and control. And in fact, a great deal of our human activity involves power and control in some way. And the central issue of this passage is about the Sabbath rules, specifically whether or not it is forbidden to heal on the seventh day, the day of rest. And actually, the ancient Sabbath restrictions did not include a ban on all work. For example, they said that acting to save a human life was a permitted exception. And we might wonder about this detail, whether the compassionate act of Jesus healing a crippled woman could have been understood as an acceptable form of work. Now, to me and you, this sounds absolutely ridiculous. Are they seriously worried about Jesus healing a woman because it was the Sabbath? It seems ridiculous to me. It's like, come on. That's exactly what happens when we feel control starting to slip away. We grasp at anything. And that's what this passage is really about. It's really about power and control. It's about the way the leader of the synagogue tried to use Sabbath rules to discredit Jesus, regardless of the good that he had just done. He made a power move. He made a power move over Jesus and against Jesus, as he insisted that Jesus was wrong. Jesus was wrong for not waiting another day to cure the woman. And understandably, this synagogue leader felt threatened. Threatened that he might lose power. Threatened that he might lose control of his congregation. And that he would be left with a loss of power as well. And so he completely ignored the benefit that this woman had. The benefit of the healing that this woman had. And so the synagogue leader gave as an excuse, a literal, a self-serving interpretation of this law. And it was just an attempt to control Jesus and to protect his own power. And think about how often that happens in our world today. We often resort to methods of power, methods of control to achieve what we want or what we feel we need. I read an article that cited a theologian, his name is Richard Rohr, and he calls this group narcissism. And it says that it has nothing to do with the love of God. It isn't a search for truth. It isn't a search for love. It's basically grasping for control. And every group at its less mature stages of development will try to put God into the pocket of its own members-only jackets. And he says that all religions do this, Jews, Christians, Muslims, among them. And his assertion about group narcissism is what this passage is really all about. And so as understandable as all this may be, for today's purposes, we see that there is this underlying motivation of a leader of a synagogue, and he's threatened by the loss of power. He's worried about the loss of numbers, and he's threatened by the loss of momentum by this rapidly growing body of faithful Christians, and he's afraid of losing more. And when we look at church history, we see examples of how power and control have led to this group narcissism. And this often happens with the tragic ending. Group after group have attempted to use rules or laws to maintain power and control. And it's happened over and over again. You have the Roman Catholic Church versus the Eastern Orthodox Church, or the Protestants and then the Catholics, the verbal and political fights between evangelicals and liberals. There's even a conflict between people with high church ideas and low church ideas. And the list goes on and on and on, but the causes of all of these conflicts are the same. A group is afraid of losing power, losing control, reducing their size, reducing their influence. And if we look around today, we see the effects of this group narcissism as leaders attempt to use control and power to win for their particular views on faith. And there's a natural tendency for us to maintain control so we can support our own priorities. We don't want to lose that control. But we must admit the use of power and control is not always bad. It can be important for a way of protection when we're in harm's way, or produce justice, or defend the helpless. But despite the fact that power and control can be used as good in many ways, we are called to resist that negative use of power for control, and to look at the model of Jesus for direction. Today's tendency to center so much of our lives on power and control, especially in selfish ways, is as dangerous today as it was 2,000 years ago. And sadly, we don't like to admit that truth. We cover it up, we hide it, we ignore it, and sometimes we're just unaware of how big of a part it plays in our lives. So for Christians, the bottom line about power and control is best understood this way. Its negative use, like the leader in the synagogue in the Bible verse, is a function of power over and against. Whenever we use power over others in the absence of love, the action leaves us separated from the values of God. It denies access to that God-given love and justice within each of us. And the leader of that synagogue attempted to preserve his own power and control by using his authority, by using his literal expression of a Sabbath law to dishonor, to weaken, and to make Jesus look bad. Make Jesus look like a rule breaker or a rebel rouser. And so he wouldn't have control over those who were trying to follow him. So the point of all this is to be careful how we use control, how we use power, how dangerous and how easy it is for us to get caught up in that trap of trying to maintain control, and the conflicts that arise when you fear the loss of power. We're afraid to lose control, and out of that fear, we just grasp at different things. We're grasping at straws to keep the control, and we think that we can maintain that control. And then we think about all the conflicts that arise because of that fear. And those conflicts really just separate. They really just divide us. They don't only separate and divide us from each other, but they keep us from fulfilling the mission of God's kingdom, the mission of spreading God's love. The gospel reading is a perfect example of that. The gospel story also provides an example of a better way to use power. A better way to use power. Jesus acted out of compassion. He acted out of mercy for the misery of the crippled woman. And he used his power to heal. He used his power to love. He used that power for, not against. Not for control, but to heal and to give life. Jesus used his power, the power of compassionate love, to heal the woman. And Jesus did not show power or control over the leader of the synagogue. He simply did it out of love. Listen to Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. It says, "In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. The love of Jesus is large enough, is big enough, is great enough that it does not exclude anyone or seek power against anyone. He used the power of love to unlock the God within each of us, a power through which we can follow Him by giving ourselves away, and caring for others. I'd like to end with a short story of exactly that example that Jesus gave us. Instead of using power to control, instead of using power to separate, instead of using power to maintain something that is slipping away from us, we can use power, we can use control to build bridges and to connect. Once upon a time, there were two brothers who shared adjoining farms. And for over 40 years, they worked side by side, sharing equipment and helping each other out whenever they needed. And then one day, a rift, an argument developed. It began with a small misunderstanding, and it grew into a major difference. And finally, it exploded. It exploded into an exchange of bitter words. It was followed by months and months of silence. And one day, the eldest brother, we'll call him Pete, was out in the fields when a wagon pulled up. And out of the wagon, a man approached Pete carrying a carpenter's toolbox. And he said, "I'm looking for a few days' work. Perhaps you have a few small jobs that I could do." "Yes, I do," said Pete. "See that creek over there? It's the border between my brother's farm and mine. My brother keeps it nice and deep to stop me from setting one foot on his beloved farm. Well, I will oblige him. I want you to take that timber over there from the barn, by the barn, and build me a fence, a new fence, a real tall one, so I don't have to look over my stinking brother's farm." The carpenter was glad to have the work. He said, "No worries, I understand. Just point me to your post-hole digger and I'll get the job done." So the carpenter set about working, and meanwhile, the farmer drove into town to a cattle auction. And when he returned at sunset, he was shocked to see what the carpenter had done. There was no fence. Instead, the carpenter had built a bridge over the creek. Walking across that bridge was Pete's younger brother. He held out his hand and he spoke to his brother. "Pete, after all I've done to you these past few weeks, I can't believe that you still reach out to me. You're right. It's time to bury the hatchet." The two brothers met in the middle of the bridge and embraced, and they turned to see the carpenter hoist his toolbox on his shoulder. He said, "No, wait. Stay a few days. I've got a lot of other projects for you." "I'd love to stay on," the carpenter said, "but I have more bridges to build." As we sing our closing hymn, if you feel the call of Jesus, you're free to come to the altar. You're free to stay in the pew and profess your desire to answer his call. Let's all join and stand and sing our closing hymn.